Thank you for watching, liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing right now. I'm not able to do interviews with everybody who asks, unfortunately. I get asked quite frequently, which I'm very grateful for. It's just I don't have a lot of time. So if I do respond to an interview, never ask me to write anything in response. That's just not really my style. I will likely, if I'm interested in the interview, respond this way in video. The show notes, of course, will be transcribed by Kat and then posted to my blog at chris.pirillo.com. For that, I'm very grateful. Dan Morrill, or Morrill, he's got 2 R's and 2 L's in his last name. He says, at GnomeDex, asked the audience what they thought human circuitry meant. Have you been able to define it better? If so, what is that definition? And I asked the audience, and they came up with really interesting answers, which will hopefully be posted at some point in the near future as we cull through the feedback forms that we asked attendees to fill out after the conference this year. But to me, it's all about life. So, yeah, I exist here. I'm real. I can pinch myself. But I'm just as real online. I mean, you're watching me through this video, potentially live if you're one of the 432 people tuned in this late in the evening. You're watching me live. I'm still very much real, but I'm coming to you through the internet. But you know I'm human. I'm human here and I'm human there. I'm human everywhere. And we as human beings not only connect with technology, but technology has started to connect with us. And more importantly, technology is helping us reconnect with our humanity and reconnect with others. I mean, how many times have you received some kind of message either through Facebook, which is where this request for an interview came in? How many times have you received something from a friend of the past, someone you grew up with, maybe an ex of some kind? This is us now. We cannot live as society. We cannot live without technology. I mean, I think back. In fact, I was having this conversation with Andy earlier tonight of what it was like when we were in college. And when I was in college, I delivered pizzas. And this was at a time where there weren't GPSs, there weren't mobile devices, no mobile phones. So you had to look at a printed map, and you had a map with you. But before you left, you had to look at a printed map, figure out the grid and coordinates, and then from there, figure out where you were supposed to be. Now, not only could you get GPS coordinates, not only could you have mobile connectivity, but I would imagine at some point in the future, some guy or gal will program some kind of app on the iPhone or whatever that you punch in an address, pizza delivery guy or girl will be able to tell you whether or not that address tips. Huh? Wouldn't that be nice? I mean, hopefully you wouldn't do anything, out of the ordinary if they did not tip. But I'm just saying it would be nice to know if you're going to get tipped or not, the chances of you tipping, kind of rate the customer, so to speak. Although I'm sure that violates some kind of privacy issue. But you know what? I got stiffed enough times that it'd totally be worth it for me to even look at. Anyway, so the idea of human circuitry is that technology is a part of us as much as we are now a part of technology, and peeling the tool apart is going to become increasingly more difficult. How do you see social fabrics or human circuitry expanding as the internet generation becomes more embedded in business? I think people are going to expect more out of software in the workplace. I think enterprise applications are going to have to suck far less than they do now. I remember getting into arguments with IT staff at Tech TV over their choice of using Lotus Notes because I couldn't stand it. The front end was just so bad. I mean, even back then, by yesterday's standards, by today's standards, certainly, but even back then, it was just bad. And they kept arguing. They said, well, the back end is wonderful. I said, that's great, but I'm not staring at the back end. I don't have to use the back end directly, okay? I'm looking at the front end here. So I know there are a lot more of me running out there today. So we get these great experiences on the web, wonderful experiences. Great UI, great UX, just wonderful workflow. That's what we're going to expect when we go to the workplace. Because if we don't get it there, yeah, you're going to hear about it. So the bar is getting raised in terms of quality and quality control. No longer is it proper to design a system that's difficult to use. You really, the world of business has to be on the ball. It was like the interview that was done at GnomeDex with Mark Bao and Francine Hardaway. That video's since been posted to my blog at chris.pirillo.com. And Mark has no idea what work is in the traditional sense. And he's not alone. The idea of going to work more and more is becoming antiquated. Telecommuting is, I think, going to become the norm. Social spaces where you could have gatherings, I think, is going to become the norm, at least as far as work is concerned. Work. And it's not going to be coming from on high, but it's going to be coming from down below. That is, as the youth enter the workforce, they're going to bring with them these expectations that things are going to be easy, fun, accessible, open. It's just going to be a given. At least that's the way I see it going down. What do you think the next big thing in human circuitry? You mentioned in your early blog entry that there would be one uber social network. Do you think that there would be one social network that the world would go to, or do you see this as a meta social network that would tie all the other networks together like a collector, like any massive website that collects information and social information, aggregates it? If I understand the question correctly, I don't think there's going to be one network to rule them all. I think more and more one's own identity is going to be their own instead of somebody else's. So, for instance, when you sign into MySpace, that's your identity on MySpace. So it's really MySpace is your identity. And that is very user unfriendly. And I would like to see the trend developing where the person gets to own more of themselves and their data rather than these websites out there. These websites, they'll be able to offer different things to the user, but the more they lock the user in, the faster I believe they will fail in the long run. Today, obviously, that's the norm, these silos of personal information. And I think the idea is that I could walk in anywhere. The website would know who I am, know all my preferences, know the people I believe are my friends, the people I barely know. I mean, it would just know all these things. We're not at that point. There's not going to be one single website so much as there will come the idea of being one single person in this sea of websites or just internet destinations, if we even call them websites at that point. How do you think that corporate branding and marketing can keep it real, he puts in quotes, without losing the audience when companies try to use social networking to sell brand or their stuff? This is tricky, and I think the more you identify with your audience and the more conversational you are about what it is that you have, the better off you're going to be. Make a relationship. Is that scalable? No, it's not. But I think the biggest success stories have always been rooted in personal expressions. If I happen to know someone at a company, I know that person at the company. I know that person. Not the company, but that person at the company. And that, leads into a story because I feel I've got a connection there. And that potentially leads to conversations on or off the record. And the more interpersonal communication I might have with someone who is on the inside, the more confident I feel in what it is that they're trying to tell me about. And as long as they're going to take my feedback. Because the worst thing I've ever experienced is someone who allegedly, like marketing, PR, whoever, allegedly wants to be open and be a part of this social network stuff and doesn't get it. They don't get it. They set up a blog, but there's no comments. Or they don't follow up with conversations that don't happen on their blog. I mean, this world on the internet is three-dimensional. It's interactive. And you have to understand that if you're really going to understand how brand and marketing are going to play into, future strategies as far as communications is concerned. It's scalable insofar as, is it worth that person's time, whoever you appoint or whichever team you appoint, to communicate with your intended audience? It's scalable on their time, and if your company or your business really wants to be a part of it, you have to be a part of it. And part of being a part of it is existing outside of networks that are your own. And that doesn't just mean Oh, I set up a Facebook page, or I've got a MySpace profile, or whatever. You've got to play. You've got to play, not just sit there and watch. It's a big difference between the two, and hopefully I don't have to explain that one too much further. Let's see here. He's got a lot of questions. Where do you see cloud computing coming into the idea of social networking? Will it be a platform only, or do you think this will expand as much as the personal computer has expanded or the mobile device has expanded? Um, Cloud computing is interesting, but I think for the user, it's not going to make a heck of a lot of difference between what they're doing today and what they're doing tomorrow. Where a website exists doesn't matter so long as it does exist. As far as the personal computer is concerned, I think having a hard drive in the sky is a reality. We'll end up, like we choose an insurance company, we may likely choose a storage provider for storage services, and being able to switch those, I'd imagine, with a greater degree of ease. But again, the idea is that we would have a good degree of choices so that there would be competition in the marketplace. How could a company approach the two-way process of social networking within the definition of human circuitry? Well, I wouldn't say the two are mutually inclusive, but it's just keeping in mind that you're a person working for a company. That's what it is. As long as you're not the company and you're not towing the company line, then I think you're going to get along well within my definition of human circuitry, in the sense that you are a human being first and a human being who works for a company second, and then you represent the company third. And that, to me, really is what I think is, I guess, the pinnacle of what all these communications can be as far as the internet's concerned, in connecting with other people, whether they have a commercial interest or not. It's just all about transparency and remembering that you are a person first. And if someone responds as a person and you don't take that as anything but impersonal, then that's your problem. It's not the person's problem. Let me try to say that again. If I get sent a press release that's very impersonal and I respond with feedback one way or another, positive or negative, I expect a very personal response in return. If I don't get that, obviously I don't have a human being on the other end, and that makes me feel a little less strong about that particular company and or brand. How would you address the adult cynicism that pervades companies to adopt or embrace human circuitry? Get over it. Either that, or go back to using rotary dial and your fax machine and floppy disks, if you've even come that far. World's growing up around you. If you're not going to grow with it, it's your prerogative. But understand, we're not going to wait for you. Do you think that people, companies, and groups are going to be able to commit that time and resources needed to advance social networking or human circuitry? They have no choice. And I think, when you put your humanity first, when you put your person first, your interests are paramount. You learn real quickly when you follow someone online what their personal interests are and their professional interests. But you still know that person. You know that person works for company X, but they're a person. And the more they are a person and less they are a company, the more open a conversation may be. And I can't tell you how many times I've been frustrated with someone in marketing or PR who just obviously does not get it. It's maddening, absolutely maddening to interact with them, because they know they don't have the time to spend on interpersonal relationships. But that's what it's all about. That's what the blogosphere is. That's what social networking is. It's not anti-social networking. Anti-social is a press release. There's nothing personal about it. Is this making any sense, or am I just like blah, 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 blah? I'm probably doing a little of both, so bear with me. Do you think there's going to be a bigger abandonment curve in social networking, much as we've seen with blogs, wikis, and other systems? A blog is just a tool. A wiki is just a tool. A social network is just a tool. I'm just a tool to a lot of websites. I'm something that brings them revenue. knock on wood, as long as that's in their game plan. Um, is it going to fade? Yeah, I think the uniqueness of a social network has been diminished. Now it's easy. Anybody can start a social network. Hey, I started a social network. You can too. Geeks.pirillo.com. You can't take that one. I've already done it. Um, I think it's certainly going to still be there in the future. I think as a buzzword, though, it will likely disappear, and hopefully sooner rather than later. I'm kind of sick of it. I'm sick of adding the same friends over and over again, especially if they're not really my friends. I don't know who they are. I just kind of follow them because they're interesting. I have very few friends in the strict sense of the word. I've got a lot of people I share affinities with. I wouldn't necessarily define them as friends, but I network with them. What has been my gain from social networking? Not much. Honestly, not much. I email works just fine for me. I connect with people that way. Instant Messenger works fine. I don't need yet another social network. YASN. So it's likely to be less important, but still going to be very much important. You just can't be everywhere all at once, and so that comes back to the idea of one being able to own their own identity no matter where they go, much like being able to own your own brand wherever you go. Understanding though that brand is becoming increasingly decentralized. How can we bring more people into the conversation with only some 4% of the people actually fully participating in social networking? How would you go about, or how should we go about involving the other 96% of the population into the noise? You can't. Point blank. It's all about relevance. As soon as it's relevant for somebody, then they'll join. But if you think about the 96%, why are they not doing it? Because it's not interesting, it's overwhelming, it's difficult. They've did it before, weren't interested. Their friends aren't there, or where their friends are, they really don't want to be. No time. I mean, all these things come into play. You can't change those things because you just can't change culture. It's just as easy to go to the web and search Google for information and get a set of results, or wherever you decide to search. I'm assuming though that 96% of the world's population uses Google to search. You can't really change that. And I think the more it ties into relevance for themselves, and the more we inch towards the idea of owning our own selves online, I think you're going to see the rest of society come into play in terms of this particular statistic. I'm not exactly sure where you pulled it from, but it sounds about right. Takes energy, takes time, and to be there. I mean, I live online. You pretty much have to live online to do it. Not everybody's willing to do that. But if suddenly if you said to me, "Hey, Chris, you own all your stuff. This is where you access your stuff. This is where it's stored. But you own it all. You own yourself. You own your identity. You own everything that you create. It just happens to be on this website. They're basically leasing this mind share from you." That's the way it's going to go. And as soon as that happens, it's like, oh. So then the family tree that I build is really mine, and these friends that I network with are really mine. I mean, these are all the things that are mine, but right now they're not mine. They're somebody else's. So the sense of ownership is gone. And when we get to the point where ownership is ours, for real, that's when I think that's the tipping point. But we're not anywhere close to that. In the current in the current DMCA environment, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act is what that's short for. How do you think laws have to change to accommodate human circuitry or social networking? What can companies do better to fix or correct non-factual information on social networking sites? It's really two questions. How do I think laws have to change? Well, they need better information. And that would mean talking to people who are actually there, who are out there doing things online for real, not just legislators who aren't really online doing things more than they need to be. Of course, there are exceptions to every rule, but I think before laws are passed, they have to be passed through some kind of committee, an open committee that is comprised of, yes, select few, certainly, but, and not to say that their word is quote-unquote law until, of course, it gets passed into a law, but at least they're going to be able to provide, at that point, provide some amount of sanity especially if they're not handpicked, at least from a perspective of whichever company pays the most money, special interest groups and whatnot. I think that needs to be a pretty large committee, or potentially even the internet in general. Let the internet vote for legislation. I know systems can be gamed, certainly, but let's give some prime indicators for people who are interested in a vote one way or another. That may help influence legislation, so long as we have the ability to do that. We can only do that if we're given the ability to do that, but certainly not doing it is kind of silly. We can't expect legislation to be passed that's going to be acceptable if we've had no feedback. There's no loop, other than when it's done, it's done. I mean, we just feel relatively powerless, and government is going to have to adapt to the fact that we're not really powerless anymore. We've got a huge voice, and we're not afraid to use it. It's going to become increasingly difficult to do things as they have been done for centuries, if not millennia. It's really we're entering a time where there is more interactivity between legislators and their constituents. There will come a time, though, where it is easier for society to give feedback on how societies run, rather than being run by a select few. Even today, the idea is important because you need leaders, but I think the amount of feedback that goes into selecting those leaders, will widen, and as that does, the laws will certainly change. What can companies do better to fix or correct non-factual information on social networking sites? Be there. Assign someone at the company if it's big enough. Be there. And if someone hasn't been assigned and someone's doing it on their own, empower them. Remember, they're a person who's working for that company. How can communities patrol themselves better to keep trolls and other miscreants out of the system while keeping the conversation going? That's impossible. The best you can do is just find good tools, and if the tools don't exist, find a different platform to work with so that the moderation tools are in place. Society will have to change to accommodate social networking. How do you see those changes coming about? Time. That's what it is. How would you use human circuitry to improve the human condition? I don't know if human circuitry can be used. It's more condition itself of the interplay between technology and humanity, at least in my definition. But I think, you see this happen a lot. Someone will post a link of a news article or something that's happening, and soon it'll just spread all around. It'll get on Dig. It'll be, everybody will be talking about it, and they'll vote it up. But what does that do? That doesn't do anything. They're not really helping the situation. They're just plinking in a dig to dig it up by one. What is that doing? Nothing. In the grand scheme of things, it does absolutely nothing. So until we can tie these relatively benign actions into real world actions, it's just going to be a bunch of people blah 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 blah. Much like me, prattling on for, I'm sure, the better part of a half hour, answering this particular series of questions submitted by Dan. Hopefully, you got a good interview out of that. I did my best with it. And anybody else care to email me or continue the conversation, my email address is chris@pirillo.com. Of course, you're also welcome to leave a follow-up response, whether it be by video or by text. My blog, chris.pirillo.com, community of geeks at geeks.pirillo.com, and this live video feed going out over the internet 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We got this chat room too, typically talking tech, at live.pirillo.com. We'll see you later.